can't hide. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Peter Bolt of CampJefferson.com. It's not the camp that you think of, but they help brands grow. And we'll go into that. But Peter, I always like to mention other episodes people should check out of the podcast. And I'll formally introduce you in a second. Since Peter hails from Toronto, I had John Warlow. He wrote the book Built to Sell. He's got a great podcast, and he talks about selling businesses, valuations, and everything in between. So check that episode out. I also had on Jason Swank. Jason was on 2 times. One, he built up his agency to over 8 figures and sold it. And then the second one was how he's been buying up agencies. He also runs a great agency group. And he also talks about kind of how they've been and why they've been building up and buying agencies. So check those out and more on InspiredInsider.com. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. And at Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships and partnerships. And how do we do that? We actually help you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the full accountability, the strategy, and the execution. So Peter, we call ourselves the magic elves that work in the background to make it look easy for the host and the company so they could just focus on their business and building relationships and creating amazing content. So, for me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way over the past decade than to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, you can go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. And we have some really cool things in store from you from Camp Jefferson. They work with some amazing brands, and they will talk about how they market brands and some of the best practices, some of the mistakes people make, and everything in between. Peter Bolt has worked 20 plus years in the world of marketing and advertising in Canada and the US. He's been a part of starting and building multiple successful agencies. He's helped lead the growth of Camp Jefferson into a successful and thriving agency with over $6 million in annual revenue and more. And most importantly, happy staff. And we're going to talk about what they do with employee engagement. Peter, thanks for joining me.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Peter, just start off and tell people about Camp Jefferson. And I think you were formerly known as DARE. So,
Correct.
Talk about the brand change. Why Camp Jefferson?
Yeah, it's the brand change is primarily due to ownership structure change. But we started off as DARE. DARE was a pretty well-known agency throughout Europe, mainly out of the UK. They wanted to expand into the North American market, and we created DARE Toronto. After a few years together, carrying on, we went through an ownership change. A new owner came in, bought the North American assets, and as we separated from there, we had to find a new name because they ended up maintaining that name over in Europe, and hence Camp Jefferson came to be.
So how'd you come up with the name Camp Jefferson? How'd that come about?
That's a good story. So at that time, we had an office in Vancouver, and we were handling some accounts in Toronto and Vancouver that were kind of deemed to be in the same category, a little bit in category, even conflicting a little. So we needed to have names that connected the two offices, but were kind of seen as somewhat unique, at least in the client's minds who we consulted during the process. And when we named ourselves Camp Jefferson for the street we lived on here in Toronto, the Vancouver office was named Camp Pacific for obvious reasons. And that level of kind of connection but distinctiveness was kind of split the middle between that made clients happy and us happy, and that's where we ended up.
So, Peter, talk more about what you do. What does the company do?
You know what? I think at our core, we help our clients grow their businesses and their brands. Now how we do that is through a bunch of different ways and what we execute, but that's at our core. What else is at our core and what we believe drives that growth or helps us drive that growth is understanding choice. We talk a lot about designing choice. And really, what's at the core of that is understanding why people are choosing you or are not choosing you and choosing one of your competitors. And as we can understand that and dissect what motivates that and what's affecting that choice, we then can kind of take that to and express and build things that are going to help impact that choice. Sometimes and oftentimes that results in communication campaigns and ad campaigns. Other times it means we learn that people aren't choosing you because your packaging is not coming off the shelf. So we'll help them redesign your packaging, or that their website is not easy to kind of work with. So we'll rebuild their website. So the outputs vary, Jeremy, but the goal and the motivation or the kind of path to get there is pretty common on understanding people's motivations, behaviors, and how that results and impacts their choice, and then putting things in the world that hopefully can have impact on them.
I imagine there's a pretty comprehensive discovery and research. I'd love to know a little bit your process for, I love that concept you're talking about of designing choice. What is some of the process where do you start companies when you're working through this?
It's kind of a come at it from both ends perspective when we talk about that. The most obvious end is getting out and talking to consumers about why they do it. But we can only get so far when we're just talking to consumers because they don't necessarily aren't primed to tell us exactly why they make their choices. So we have to dig a little deeper. We do a lot of what we call choice audits, where we take certain elements like price out of the equation and get people to understand what would cause them to choose certain brands over others. When we eliminate certain things from the equation, it helps to isolate what are the true drivers and motivators there. But we do a lot of, what I would call kind of typical consumer research and a lot more organic consumer research where we're really trying to listen and understand, because oftentimes those motivations, which are at the core of people's choices, are a little more hidden than obvious. That's the kind of one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is we find it usually really helpful to dig into the DNA of our clients. And that means getting pretty intimate with the key stakeholders around the table, not only those in the marketing department. In fact, those are the ones that generally we have a pretty good idea of already, but getting into product development, getting into founders, getting into board members, that can really be an effective way to understand what's unique about this brand, this company. And so when we're trying to match up consumer motivations with how we're going to meet those as a brand in the marketplace, understanding the DNA of a client, what motivates them, what makes them unique, what makes them different, and how we might be able to package that in a way that's going to impact people's choices is kind of the kind of double-angled approach that we kind of usually employ almost across the board.
I kind of see you, I guess, as choice scientists. You're doing all these experiments to see what is working and what's not. So I'm curious, some of the surprising findings. When you look back at some of the experiments you've done over the years, when you've eliminated certain things or added certain things, what sticks out as a finding that maybe surprised you? It reminded me of the book Influence by Robert Cialdini, where they did a bunch of experiments, social experiments. I know Dan Ariely's book, Predictably Irrational, he also talks about different experiments that people are doing from in a social situation. What are some that has stuck out that surprised you?
Yeah, I think what constantly surprises me is how much we believe rational decision making defines our choices, and how little it actually does, or how prominent emotion and gut are to making those actual choices. And whether that's a choice to choose to buy a mobile phone, buy a car, or donate to a particular charity. I think at the core, we it's always, and it shouldn't surprise me anymore, Jeremy, but it does, that those emotional drivers are really the ones that affect choice. And the more rational, functional things often are our rationalizations to justify the choice we made. And that's why some of the research, I love your term of choice scientist. I might steal that from you, but
it's all yours.
Yeah. I do think, you ask people why they buy something, and they're like, well, why do you buy that beer? Well, I like the taste of it better. If you do blind taste tests on beers, it's almost impossible for people to tell the beer they drink. Like even hardcore beer drinkers get this wrong, because we've worked in the bev alcohol business for a while. We actually were working in a category in the beer category for a while, where people said they actually bought this beer because it's colder. And you're like, it's colder. And like, it was a brand perception that it was a refreshing, cold, crisp beer. But
It's like, put the other one in the refrigerator a little longer, and then maybe
if it's in the ice or the, so things like that, again, people's default answer, oh, I buy that one because it's the best price. Well, okay, well, if price isn't out of the equation, or we found a lower competitor, well, why wouldn't you buy that one? Well, it's not the same. So there's usually, I think that's surprising, and again, maybe it shouldn't be, is that there's almost always reasons beyond the first 2 or 3 reasons people give you on really what motivates their choice.
What's an example? What's an example of where you've uncovered what's the actual emotional driver behind something?
You know what?
Because people don't consciously know this stuff. Like, you probably have to peel the layers off, and they think, oh, it's on price. And you're like, no, it's this. No, it's this. And probably like you said, the 3rd or 4th or 5th thing down. What is an example of those emotional drivers?
Yeah, we started working with a mobile phone company a while back. It's called Kudo Mobile. And they are generally in the kind of lower tier price. They're called a flanker brand. Not necessarily right at the lowest price possible, but definitely in the kind of value part of the equation. And as we talk to many people, I make my decision based on the network, the quality of the network, and I, base my decision based on price. As we dug into why people chose this brand, it was all about the experience. It was, and what we learned is customers of this brand loved it. And not because of the low price they were paying, because the community experience around it was really good to be able to find help. The ability to, adjust your plan, really easy. These kind of elements came to life that made the experience in a category where the experience is not really expected to be great. In fact, most people, at best, their telco provider is like good if it doesn't mess up. And if the only time I have feelings towards it is negative if it screws up. So the people who use the Kudo brand, customers of this brand, were ecstatic. They rated it the #1 brand in the entire mobile category. People who hadn't heard of this brand or weren't customers but had heard of it ranked it nearly the lowest brand. And so we realized, and yet the price was the same for everybody. Although the network was the same for everybody, but what was missing was the experience. And what we ended up doing with that was we created this kind of platform, expressed as a tagline called Choose Happy. And the idea of Choose Happy was like, hey, you don't have to take a miserable telco experience. There is a happier option out there. You're seeing on the screen, we then put that filter literally through everything that this organization does. And I'll give you one example, which is kind of interesting on how you play up, this idea of Choose Happy. They had this feature, like virtually every telco company does, that pauses the data when you start getting near to. It's a commodity across everything. And they actually, our client was saying, hey, we could do something with this, but I'm not sure it's all that unique. And we thought, well, we know, we listen to people, data overages, and this was a couple of years ago. So data overages are a little bit more serious now that unlimited plans are everywhere. But data overages were a real pain in the ass. And this shock of this bill that people would get. So we thought, hey, if we could take this feature and spin it into a consumer benefit, i.e., you're going to have a shock-free bill. And that's how we launched this thing. It's called shock-free data and a surprise-free bill. And all of a sudden we took that and made that kind of commoditized feature with a filter of the emotional, hey, choose happy, and made it in from a feature into a benefit that created a better experience. And it was the number one reason that people chose the Kudo brand, led to great for the next 2.5 years, led to tremendous growth in their brand and their subscription base. And it was, again, not an original feature that any other telco had. It was just packaged up to kind of promote the uniqueness of the experience that the Kudo brand delivered.
Yeah, I love that. You took one of the features and you put it like there from your deep research, the emotional filter over it.
Exactly. You could take that. We did the same thing. They had a refer a friend program. Refer a friend programs exist all over the place. But also, we asked our client to go through it. We're like, so happy experience, easy. Did you feel good about making the right? It was the UX on this thing was terrible, and it made it difficult for people. We switched it up. Wasn't all that difficult to do. We switched it up, made it a lot easier for people to do. Timed it to when people really feel like they want to make references, and we had a 10x return on the amount of people referring people in the first year. It was this great thing. Again, instead of focusing necessarily on products and features, it's the benefits those can provide. And in this case, why it creates a happier experience in a category that generally is not known for delivering happy experiences.
Yeah, what were some of those things that you remember helped with helping them 10x the referrals?
You know what? Ultimately, it was a combination of a couple of things. First and foremost is making it easy. People are lazy and, they just don't want to work too hard. And yes, if you're giving me a bonus of some sort to refer a friend, I want the bonus, but I'm not willing to work too hard for it. So the first thing was making it easy to execute, both on the giver's end and on the receiver's end. Like I got to make it. So, a classic kind of user experience journey to make it really simple. The next thing is, and I mentioned this, is the timing of when you promote to clients or customers when, hey, you should check out our refer a friend program. And what we found was there is a period, kind of from 30 to 90 days after they come on board where they're far more likely to refer. They've experienced it. They're probably the difference from their previous provider is most ripe in their mind. They're kind of your biggest evangelist. And by promoting it in that time period, not before they experience or, a year down the road when it's not kind of as top of mind with them, really helped those. So those two things were the biggest differentiator. I mean, we experimented with different levels of awards for the referring person. And to be honest, that has an impact as well. But I would say those two things were the biggest drivers.
Yeah, I mean, some of that would be, I think, a little counterintuitive. At least I've thought about it before. It's like, well, they just started. We don't want to bother them. Let's wait 6 months. And from the research, it's like, that's not going to work. They're probably most excited, but I could see, and I've even thought this, well, we don't want to bother them. They're just starting, but that's when they're most excited too.
Yeah. You buy a new pair of shoes, you really love them. And if you're like a basketball player like I am, or a skier, and you buy a new pair of skis and you go out on them for a couple of weekends, you're like, oh, but you got to try these. They're so amazing. That's when you want to talk about stuff. And that's, is even as something as kind of typical and everyday as a cell phone plan, it still applies.
We talked about in the very beginning how people market brands. I want to talk about some of the mistakes people make, but you created this video here. You guys have such a creativity about you, and we'll show some of the other ones. How do you come to this where someone's on a trampoline? And by the way, if someone's listening to this on one of the audio channels, you can go, there's a video version, and I'm showing the Camp Jefferson site. And you can see here, this person is jumping on a trampoline. And I'm just wondering, how did you come up with this person with the Velcro suit jumping onto this board?
Yeah, well, I mean, it started with our kind of, again, ways we're trying to make people happy and deliver on our promise to choose happy. One of the strategies was kind of like what you're saying, pick your perks. Put another way, choose what makes you happy. And so we provided customers the real opportunity to kind of going, hey, not everyone has the same value to the same kind of functionality. I might like a speed boost. Some other people might like unlimited long distance international plans. Other people might like rollover data. So we kind of went, well, instead of kind of giving them one option, I think it would make people happier if they had their option to choose. So there's where the strategy around pick your perks and choose what makes you happy. As far as the specific execution, we've worked with our client to define, what our brand personality is a lot. And we want to be kind of a fun, youthful, brand in the marketplace. We also, Jeremy, we spend, the Kudo brand spends considerably less money in media than the other big partners out there. So we have to do creative that kind of stands out. And to be honest, once we kind of got this idea of like, hey, we have 15 seconds to show people how we can pick your perk. How can we do that in a fun way? And this idea and the giant claws that people were going down as a person. Yeah, that was a great one. People having to pick your perk. We just kind of came up with a funny, hopefully unignorable way for people to understand what we were trying to communicate.
Love it. I'm just always wondering what's happening around the boardroom where it goes like, yeah, let's get someone a trampoline and put them in a Velcro suit and have them jump onto a board.
It's kind of the fun of being able to work in this business.
Seems so random.
Discussion you have around the boardroom table.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll talk about, you do a lot of things as a company and you put out things in my mind that's a bit counterintuitive. And I love that because it's not something I would think of. And we'll talk about the Walter Caesar one because this is one of my favorite ones. So I encourage everyone to go campjefferson.com and you can go to their work/work and you can kind of see some of these, but you can watch the full video here. And we'll talk about this because this is, again, you'd think these are the ones that are getting cut. Like what we're going to show here are the clips that I would think 99% of companies would cut from a video. And we'll see why, but talk about some of the mistakes people make when they're marketing their brands. What have you seen?
You know what?
Or maybe you have to correct the companies that come to you and you have to kind of educate them on, we're not going to do this because we've seen that done and that's not going to work.
Yeah. I think there's a couple things, and this Caesar case will bring some of these to life. One is kind of catering to the category tropes, and kind of going, this is why people enter the category. So I'm just going to speak to those as well. Reasons, there's a common marketing term called reasons to believe. It's, hey, what's the proof points you have on why people should believe you and buy? And we kind of fundamentally think reasons to believe are a bit misguided. They'll take you to the standard category reasons as opposed to reasons to choose. And what is going to make them choose you over someone else? So I think a common mistake is kind of playing to the category tropes, playing to the things that people go to the category to get and are almost table stakes. And if you're just spending good money of your client's money out there promoting table stakes, you're not creating a lot of differentiation for you, and you're not getting a great return on their investment. So I think that's one thing that people do. I think the other thing that comes with that is generally you're not that differentiated. Like the differentiation quite literally drives growth. There was a great study, and I can't remember the name off the top of my head. It came out just a few months ago from Work that showed that brands that have true differentiation will grow 25% higher than brands that have limited to no differentiation. So being unique and being regarded as unique really matters. And certainly playing to the industry defaults is not going to do that. The other thing I think that people will often mistaken is trying to go after everybody, not defining who your audience is or who the potential person you're trying to attract. And I don't mean by age or even other demographics. I mean by like this type of person is going to be interested in us. And when we focus on that, it's going to give us a lot more creativity. It's going to get a lot more insight into be able to do something meaningful. And the Walter Caesar example you have up there is a perfect one on that.
So let's talk about this one for a second.
Sure.
If you're listening here, there's a video here. We're looking at it. I'm not gonna, ruin the punchline here, but it is very, in my mind, counterintuitive. So just talk about what's going on here.
Sure. So basically what we did here was they are new entry to the market, Walter Caesar. They are competing against a giant who owns literally 90% of the market share in mods. They needed to do something unique.
Yeah. And Walter Caesar is a drink.
Walter Caesar is a drink. For those in the States, it's like a Bloody Mary type drink. It's up here in Canada. It's made with clam juice. Really popular drink, but very polarizing. People love it or people hate it. And when I was referring to audience profiling, we were not going to go out there. We had literally, I would say, maybe 1/50th of the budget of mods to tackle this. So we're not going to go out there and convince people who don't like Caesars as a drink to go and drink one. We're going to try and take share from people who are drinking Caesars and come drink ours. And the thing about this product it was really authentic. It was great. It was a good quality, authentic Caesar. So once we decided on that audience, all of a sudden it made things really, really much more, opened up new avenues. And what we did, because we played off the insight that Caesars are so polarizing. And what we created we referred to as the de-testimonial. And that if Caesars are so polarizing and we're a real authentic Caesars, then people who don't like Caesars will particularly hate us. They will hate us even more than they hate others because we're a true, real Caesar. And so we convinced the client, and I gave a client a ton of credit, they had a lot of trust that we could pull this off, that we would show people hating their product, detesting their product, swearing after they took a sip of their product, showing terrible faces to prove just how genuine our Caesar was, and that we were a product that, as you can see, was made for Caesar lovers. So if you love Caesars, you're really going to love this drink. And again, those principles of not playing off the industry tropes and understanding of your audience really comes to light on being able to do products that really show people hating it to show just how authentic it truly is. And for a Caesar lover, that's exactly what they're looking for. It was tremendously successful for them, low budget, and just immediately shot them to the top. They were number one fastest drink that summer.
Let's talk about trust for a second. Anyone who runs an agency, your clients are coming to you for your expertise, but still they have opinions. And how do you get how do you get a client to agree to this? I mean, like, hey, client, we're going to show videos of people hating your products and multiple things. They're going to make bad faces. They're going to say it's gross. And you got approval to actually follow through with this. So how do you get the client to agree?
It is really based on trust. And
like, Peter, we hired you to make us look good, and this is what you show us. Like, I can see this going south quickly.
You can imagine the presentation. Well, I will say the thing that's maybe a bit misunderstood about our industry, we don't generally go away and just come back and go, hey, we got it. It's like in one fell swoop. So we worked with these guys on this strategy of kind of going, hey, if we're authentic, how can we separate ourselves from this? What is going to make us unique? We want to go after Caesar lovers. We have a right to win with them more than anyone else. and then there was the big loop to kind of going, okay, a great way to show that we're authentic is to show how much Caesar lovers or people who don't like Caesars hate us. And that was loop. And they really bought off on the strategy. When we showed them the creative, the biggest question, this is where trust came in, was can we do it so that the net takeaway, even though we're showing people not liking our product and de-testimonials, as we've referred to it, can the net takeaway be to the people we care about, this is going to be a real authentic good Caesar, and as the line for Caesar lovers, and that took a bit of a leap of faith on their part, but relationships, having previous success, and again, knowing that we are in it, and unfortunately, this isn't the case for all advertising agencies, because sometimes advertising agencies just want to do crazy work for the sake of doing crazy work. And I think, the key to building that trust is we're here to grow your business, and we fundamentally believe and have real good strategic insight to show that this is going to do that. It's a bit risky for sure, but we've mitigated the risk with a lot of the research and understanding we do. And you need something to stand out, because you're not going to be able to outspend, and you're not going to be able to kind of outmarket. So you got to be smarter. And I think those combinations came for this client, but we have many clients who, put that trust in us as their partner, because they know we have their interests at heart. In fact, to be very transparent, with many of our clients, our fee agreements are actually set up so that we win when they win. We don't necessarily just get paid for hours; we get paid on results, and those also help because we're all vested in the same outcomes.
I could see, Peter, how the de-testimonial can work in a number of different types of companies, not just this. Because someone's thinking, well, they have a weird, a different brand, or maybe it tastes funny or whatever. But this could work, I think, if you focus on the people you don't want to attract and highlight those things and create a de-testimonial out of it. I'm wondering if you've used it or seen other examples. I could see this in kombucha companies. I mean, I love kombucha actually, but I could see that working in that, not just drink categories, but just highlighting. We don't want, even in a car company, like someone's talking about all the features, why they hate of it, whereas someone who wants those features, it speaks to them.
I think it's a really interesting strategy when there's a polarization in the product, that for the same reason, people love it and people hate it. Like you might kind of go, this bed is very, very soft. And for that exact reason, people love it. And for that exact same reason, people hate it. And those are the types of scenarios where that idea of like the testimonial or showing, because it's that same feature that people hate that causes people to like it. And if your audience is just going over the people that already like soft beds, then you're probably in a good place.
Yeah. When I was doing research, I was reading, you really also, one of the things you focused in on was client relations and growth. So for a company, what are some of the things that you think about or are instructive for someone when you are talking to someone from another company? Say, hey, here's how we think about client relations.
Yeah. It's such a great question. To be honest, I think our number one reason for growth, to be very honest, is our relationships with clients. And I think it starts with empathy. And being truly understand what the position they're in, what they're being measured against. We often push clients, don't worry, it's risk, but it'll be great. And I think we have to put ourselves in their shoes in a very empathetic and sympathetic way to understand, these are potentially their jobs at risk. If they a big investment out there and it doesn't work, it's not just, that campaign didn't work. It's like, okay, I'm looking for a new job now. So I think really it starts with that. And what flows from that is treating and having the passion for their business as if it's our own. And, so that requires us being, digging in, being as knowledgeable on that. But it also just, it has that ability, like, we can bring in a fresh voice. We can bring in the voice of the consumer. We can bring in an outside perspective. But at the same time, we need to understand the world that they're operating in. And if we do that well, we together can take leaps, because they know we're not pushing them into unnecessarily places for just for the sake of doing something outlandish or risky, that we're doing it for the right reasons and because we truly believe it. So I think that's it. I think the other piece that really builds that relationship is collaboration and transparency. Unfortunately, in our industry, there is, kind of an adage where you get the brief from the client and you go away from 3 weeks and you come back and you go, ta-da, here it is, we've cracked it and it's right, and we really hope you go ahead with this. I don't think that's the best way to build relationships. I think working together, sharing early, sharing often, exploring areas together, those are the things that help us to understand how they think, and that helps them understand what we think, and then together we are better for it. But it takes, you mentioned trust earlier, Jeremy, and it really takes, it both takes trust and leads to trust when you get it right.
Yeah, I love that. Empathy, collaboration, transparency. And it kind of goes back to the foundation. The foundation is you have to have staff that have empathy, right? So talk about the hiring process.
Yeah, you're right. In our industry, our people are our product. Our ideas that come from the people is what we sell. Is that, so bringing in the right type of people is absolutely crucial. And we have a pretty there's a few kind of principles or tenets about Camp Jefferson that we are fairly adamant about doing. And again, you mentioned one, being able to have empathy. Kind of on the flip side of that is, no egos. Egos tend to get in the way of empathy really quickly. So in our business, there's no lack of egos, and we really pride ourselves on finding people who don't. I think, again, a collaborative spirit. We have different groups within the agency, as any kind of company does. We have strategy folks and creative folks and production folks, project management folks. But the realization that anyone and everyone is contributing to making the idea great is really important. Having each other's back, that it's not my role and over to you, and that no kind of passing of the baton. Those are some of the tenets that really drive us. And we're in a social, fun business. I think having people who we definitely don't look for a single prototype, but having people who can get along and work together, bring diverse and unique perspectives, and feel very kind of comfortable doing so. That's really the key to our success here. And then we have to fuel that with a culture that accepts that and that allows people the freedom, the flexibility to be themselves, both in their lifestyle, but in how they work. And interestingly, we have our approach to training and even rewards is to think about kind of the whole person, and not just the person you are at work, because we do take up a lot of your time. But if we think about you more holistically, and how we can help, like in our training programs, to not just give you the obvious training, but kind of help you expand and where you're going, it can be a really win-win for both of us, for the person, and then ultimately better. I'll maybe give you a quick example of that, Jeremy. We did a training program where we took the entire agency for a day, and we brought in this former FBI director who was leading a practitioner in cold cases. And the day we spent trying to crack actually a real existing cold case. He gave us all the material, all the research, all the investigation that's been done. And it may seem quite tangential to an agency, and to some degree it was, but it was a great day. But what it really was interesting is it actually ended up having a lot of great impacts, because trying to dig through, a puzzle, fit the pieces together. What could have been happening? What were the one? It was a fantastic day, but it like probably one of our most, well revered, and the feedback we got as far as a training day goes. But it was kind of on a unique perspective, and I think that approach to the kind of thinking about people as people, not just employees, has really helped us, not only in finding the right type of people, but in helping them grow.
I love that. What about on the reward side?
Yeah.
What are some things that you think about that are maybe unique rewards? Because it sounds like it's very kind of individualized.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things. I mean, not everyone is driven by a bigger paycheck or more money. Most people appreciate that. Let's be very honest. But also, our resources, are not infinite when it comes to just giving out raises and such. So I think understanding what drives people's and what motivates people. Sometimes it's more days off. Sometimes it is the ability to do unique training programs that maybe they would never get a chance to do. I mean, another example is how we've structured our work week. So we're a very collaborative business. So we do get together for a couple days a week in the office, Wednesdays and Thursdays. But we quite purposefully, schedule our other days to allow people greater freedoms. In fact, we have this program, it's called Full Flex Fridays, where we try and eliminate the use of emails, meetings, and get-togethers on Fridays so that people can use that day for what they feel the best purpose is. Sometimes that's catching up on work. Sometimes it's just sitting down and having dedicated, uninterrupted work time, which people tremendously value. And sometimes it's, hey, I'm in a good place. I'm going to start my weekend a little early, but having that ability to allow people, the freedom to kind of determine their schedule, and it starts with, having real confidence in people. And if you hire people you trust and feel are good people, you can give them that latitude because it's going to return, and then some.
What's something that's baked in the hiring process that you find valuable? Like I know I was talking to someone the other day. They use, companies use different tools. They specifically use predictive index. They like it. I know others have used culture index. Others use Colby. Others have used different tests. But aside from that, what is something that's kind of baked into the hiring process to help you to actually, because I'm sure a lot of people, when you put out something, a lot of people apply and you have to weed out people. So
Yeah.
what's something that you do?
I wish it was cooler. But probably our biggest key to success is having them meet more people across the agency. And not just within their kind of discipline. So, hey, I'm a project manager. Well, don't just meet your project manager boss. Meet some creative people, meet some strategists, start to get a feel. And what's interesting, Jeremy, is not only do we get a good sense of that person and what they're going to be like, but they get a better sense of us. And I think that is what sometimes is forgotten when you're looking at people, is that it's as much about the fit, that person fitting in your culture and bringing value and diversity into your culture, as it is about, the other way around. And I think exposing them to who we are, how we think and how we work, and letting them make a good judgment on, is this the right kind of place for me? We're not the biggest agency in Canada. In fact, we're kind of a mid-sized agency. There are a lot bigger places with bigger headcounts and stuff that they can go to, but there's something about us that is really appealing to a lot of people. And if it works for you, then it's probably going to work for us. So it's a kind of a more of a two-way street on that. So not that rocket science or any cool tool, but really that exposure we find really helps.
I was reading, Peter, with about employee engagement in your company.
Mhm.
That, I'm not sure what's at today, but at the time when I was reading it, employee engagement at over 86%. Talk about what that means and what are the things that you do as a company to foster employee engagement?
Yeah, it is, thankfully, I think we're at 88 this year. So we went up a couple bit from your research, but yeah, it's again, it comes back to that principle I mentioned before about thinking of the person as a whole person. So what can we do to make your work life more enjoyable, more motivating, allow you greater growth? But also, what's the person you are out of work, and how can we, make sure that what we're asking of you and what you're bringing fits in with that? I think there's the other thing, and this stems from I think our leadership team right down is a feeling of team. And I'll give you an example. A couple examples. We had one in our history. We had one really, really challenging client. We brought them on, new business, working great, said all the right things. A few months into the relationship, it's getting pretty difficult. And at one point, the relationship got to a point where it's really tough. And a couple of people are getting quite upset from these interactions. And we stood up as a management team, we decided in my first time in my 20-year career, we actually fired a client. We said, you know what, this isn't working for us. And although we appreciate the revenue and all that stuff, it's not working. And standing up for our clients, for our employees in that matter, it really shows that we have their back. And a similar situation when COVID hit, a lot of our clients' budgets, came back, and many agencies had to lay off many people. Our management team took a pay cut for quite a bit of time so that we didn't have to lay off a single person. And we did that because not only did we just think it's just not the right thing to do at this point in time to lay off people who are going to have no hope of finding a job, but we also did it kind of going, this too will pass. And we want to be in a strong position to come out of this. And I can tell you, our growth coming out of the pandemic was really phenomenal. 20 plus growth coming out of the pandemic, and 76% of that was with our original clients, organic growth. And we would have never been able to achieve that had we, had to retool the team and rehire the team. So while it kind of sounds like a very generous approach to make, it was good for our people, but it was also good for us. And the two need not be independent.
Yeah, I want to. I have one last question for you,
Sure.
Peter. Before I ask it, I just want to point people to check out and learn more. You can go to campjefferson.com. They work with some amazing companies. They have some great examples of just their thought process. I know you have some on the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, the CAMH. There's some videos and information on that, and we already point out a few other ones on their work page. So I just encourage everyone to check those out. And the Walter Caesar one's hilarious. So you should definitely watch that one. My last question is just about mentors in the industry. Your mentors, people you've learned from throughout the years, some of the lessons you learned from them in your business.
You know what? It's a great question. And, we're in such a people-oriented business that I think mentorship is really important, and as a bit of a side note, it's interesting when we were all working from home due to the pandemic and COVID, I think that's the one piece, that really kind of probably suffered the most. We were able to give guidance and direction. That's no problem. But the true mentorship takes connectivity and takes being there. And it's a really important one. I know for me, and it's funny, I was just sharing this perspective of some advice, a mentor of mine gave me, and it would literally be 12 years ago or more, and it stuck with me. And it was about, how to present yourself. I'm a fairly opinionated person and usually kind of have quick to make decisions. And the advice was, listen and contemplate before you come in. And those sorts of advice, those pieces of advice can stick with you. And I think the beauty of, this is a personal bias, but a beauty of a kind of a mid-sized place is you have far more interactions. You have far more ability to get exposed to people who have been through something, have seen something, not just your direct boss or manager. And I think that allows for kind of the softer side of mentoring. And it's a huge piece of it. We set up very, deliberate programs to cross-pollinate mentors. But I actually think the soft side of mentorship of being with people, seeing them in action, that little comment at the end of a presentation of, hey, this was really great, or if you'd done a little more of that. I think those are the little pieces that tend to stick with people a little longer and make impact.
I want to be the first one to thank you. Everyone, check out more episodes of the podcast. Check out campjefferson.com, and we'll see you next time. Peter, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. It was a real pleasure.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like $100 grand.